Shalom. All praises to Yahweh, Bashem, Yahweh Shai, Bashem, Rakah, Kodash, double honors to my apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Shalom to my brothers teaching this word. And as you can see, as we're getting very closer to November, and you know what's going to be happening in November, over there in America, it's going to be cut to the benefits, the SNAP, the EBT, and over 40 plus, I read in an article, over 40 plus million people, rely on the snaps and these benefits, over there in America, man. And this devil, Esau Edom, he's about to come down with great wrath. He's sharpening that sword that's mentioned, in the book of Ezekiel, in chapter 21. Esau sharpening the sword, man. At the end of the day, it's really the Most High bringing down his wrath, because Esau is the sword of the Lord on the left-hand side, and Yahweh Shemashai is about to open up on the vast majority of our people, man. And only the elect are going to be protected when the Lord, showcases his wrath, because the elect are the only ones that took heed to Yahweh Shemashai, the only ones that feared the Lord and sought him, and really repented. The vast majority of our people are going to suffer now, man. Suffer, death by pain. That's how they're going to go out, and it's going to be very ugly. We're approaching very ugly times. It's going to be horrible, man. The Lord is going to let Esau loose, man. Right now, Yahweh Shemashai, since the politically correct era, the Lord had Esau tuned down, especially for this, ministry and this grace period that we needed, but now, as the elect are more likely sealed, and ultimately, the Lord's going to let loose the devil, and the rest of Israel has heard this word. That's why when the scripture said, when this gospel is preached, then shall the end come. This ministry has been preached throughout the whole world, man. Everyone knows about the Hebrew Israelites. Everyone knows about the truth. There's no excuses no more. Okay, the Lord has sent forth the prophets, man, and started with our apostles, for decades, man. 40 plus years, man. That was a long time. According to our timeline, the Lord had the prophets out there for a while, and that was the mercy of the Lord, and most of our people rejected it, because really the Lord rejected them. So now they're gonna have an ugly and horrible demise, and Lord willing, this be it, man. Lord willing that Esau doesn't just kick the can, Esau stalling the the destruction. And at the end of the day, even if Esau is stalling it, it's really the Lord controlling Esau, because it's not their appointed time yet. But Lord willing that this is, because we don't want to stay here, man. We want to be in the kingdom, and we understand that we have to go through all the tribulation, man. The sooner these tribulations come, the sooner these prophecies be fulfilled, the sooner Yahweh Shai returns, man. And Lord willing, we're part of the Lord's elect, and we get delivered, man. But the ugly times are definitely coming, and this, benefits cuts. And we know, through the Spirit, Yahweh Shemashai revealed unto our apostles that, that demon Trump, he's Nero, man. And Nero was a major catalyst, of the persecution of the followers of Yahweh Shai. We know persecution is coming back in a big time way, and AI is going to have a huge hand, like Apostle, not Apostle, like Elder Beloved Brother Yahshua says. AI is going to be a major for that tribulation, man. At a time like no other, man. And AI is going to have a heavy hand in that persecution and that great tribulation, which is Jacob's trouble, man. And it's going to get really spooky, and it's going to get really ugly out here, man, as we approach in 2026, man. Lord willing, it be the year that MOTB, which is the microchip, be made mandatory, man. Because over here in the UK, man, we're at the dawn of the digital IDs becoming really mandated, and there's talk about, you're going to get fined if you don't show your, digital ID, man. Shit's getting serious, man. What manner of persons are you meant to be, man? And I say that for myself too, man. Now is the time, to be rooted in Yahweh Shai. Now is the time not to be playing around, man. Now is the time to be serious, man. More than ever, man. We're in the last seconds, man. The MOTB is right around the corner, man. And we know after the MOTB, the destruction and the return of Yahweh Shai is imminent. And the day of the Lord is going to be the most scariest day ever, man. And how much more the time of Jacob's trouble that's gonna, start before the day of the Lord. The worst time period ever, man. It's gonna be so bad out here that Yahweh Shemashai is gonna send Salakia is gonna send Archangel Michael. The reason I accidentally said Daniel, because it's in the book of Daniel 12:1 that the Lord's gonna, have Michael the Archangel come down, and basically, look after the elect, because the elect are gonna be, needing help in that time, and the Lord is not gonna leave his elect hanging, because we're heading into ugly times, man. A time like no other, man. This could be the president, Slakia, the precedent of all hell breaking loose. The government shut down in America. This could be their way of bringing that crisis, man, because they need that crisis, man, so that they can get stricter and more draconian and bring in, the mandates for digital IDs and ultimately leading to the mark of the beast, which is the microchip, as well as the CBDCs, coming, because the CBDCs are here. They're just, piloting, and how Trump, he tricked the American masses, with that stable coin, which is the same thing. It's just that these dumbass maggots can't see it, because they're drunk off that witchcraft, as well as the people on the left, because that right and left dynamic is really controlled by the elites of Edom. It's really BS, and it's a major, psyop on these people, man. They can't see it, but the elect, are the only ones that can truly see the full picture, that the Lord, wants us to see, because we know in part, we prophesy in part, but Yahweh Shemashai has given our apostles and elders the 100% truth that we need for salvation. This is 2 Ezra 15 verse 19. A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for the great tribulation. And as we're, hearing news about the government shutdown and the, benefits being cut, you got stupid ass people on the internet, primarily Jake, venting their, stupid desires, man, saying that they're going, rob, all manner of, craziness on the internet, completely forgetting that everything is being tracked, everything is being, surveilled by this devil, and what you say, is going to be used against you. The AI, Esau has the AI, he has the, complete surveillance, over the web, so all you people, that are saying you're going, loot and burn down stores because of the SNAP benefits and all these benefits going away, Esau's waiting for you to do that. He's sharpening the sword, because Esau wants that excuse to come full draconian, man. He's basically, setting you in a trap, and the vast majority of our people are going to fall for that trap, man. They're going to go out, looting, and stuff, instead of, seeking the Lord and trying to get right with Yahweh Shemashai and hoping in the Lord and trusting in the Lord. The vast majority of our people are going to resort to, crime. They're going to resort to, breaking, looting and stuff, and not just only our people, It's just that our people, Jake, he's just so dumb enough to be on the internet, spewing about, foolish desires, man. I'm gonna try and get my shit, completely, forgetting about, about the Lord, man, at the end of the day. The Lord is not in their thoughts, man, for the vast majority of our people, man. They're just in a carnal mindset, man, Instead of repenting and seeking Yahweh Shemashai, Jake's gonna resort to, getting things their way, But it's gonna be bad for you because Esau, Edom wants that. He wants you to come, without violence. So he has the excuse to send in the troops, and the troops are already here, especially in America, in the cities, man. The National Guard, and if even even as well as the troops, they have the robots, man. Esau has technology. The Lord has blessed this man with the sword. Our people are gonna get a big ass whooping, man. Jake is gonna get, the 2/3 of our people and the rebellious of our people are gonna get a huge ass whooping, man. The Lord is gonna beat the living shit out of the 2/3, man. And he's gonna use Esau to do it. Because remember, Esau is the sword of the Lord on the left hand side. So as there, the benefits, because Esau's the devil, of course. He's gonna cut those benefits, and ultimately it's the will of the Lord, because the Lord is gonna make it very uncomfortable. And we ourselves, we're in the midst of all of this. So we're going to be, in an uncomfortable situation. But guess what? We have the wisdom and knowledge of Yahweh Shai. And we're not going to go, Lord willing, we remain, rooted in Yahweh Shai. We're not going to be like these wicked ass jakes that are just going to loot stuff and that. We're going to trust in the Lord, especially brothers in America and the rest of the hopeful elect family over there, because America is going to be an ugly place, man, before it gets destroyed. It's going to be Yahweh Shai is going to take America down, bitterly. It's going to be a horrible, horrible destruction, man. And how much more, before the actual, great destruction of the nuclear missiles, But the Lord's going to make horrors over there, man. It's going to be a haunted house, basically. The amount of death that's going to happen over there, even before the missiles hit. So the Lord has a great sacrifice in Basra, but before then, a huge time of great tribulation and great persecution on the Israelites as a whole, but primarily on the men of Yahweh Shai. Because Esau, Edom, the elites, they know about us, man. They know about the messengers of Yahweh Shai. Because the messengers of Yahweh Shai are not no light thing. When the Lord's messengers are on the scene, that means the Lord's about to do something. He's about to showcase his power, man. And the elites are scared, man. They see the chariots, they see the men of Yahweh Shai, starting with apostles, standing on their feet, proclaiming this good news, and you see, the hopeful elect waking up worldwide, that scares the shit out of these elites. So they're gonna come down with a hammer, man, and they're moving fast with the MOTB system, and ultimately the chip is gonna be here very soon, So it's gonna get wild out here, man. People are gonna be robbing each other for the lack of bread, and you can see that, man. People, it hasn't even happened yet, but people on the internet saying that they're gonna do it. The minds of these people, man. Jake, and even you have Edomites and other people, venting on the internet saying that, on TikTok saying that they're gonna, get their shit, and that's what Esau wants. That's what the elites want when they come down on the people. They want the people to do madness so that they can be justified bringing the sword, just as Trump, made the cartels, criminals. Slacky made them into domestic terrorists. The gangs are going to be made into domestic terrorists. And ultimately anybody's going to be a terrorist, so they can, put you to death on the spot, man. You ain't going to be put in a court and tried and stuff. No, they're just going to, it's going to go full draconian, man. It's going to be wild out here, man. It's going to get very ugly, and if you're not reading Yahweh Shai, you're going to be in a pitiful place, man. That's why the scriptures mention the wisdom and knowledge of Yahweh Shai is going to keep, really the elect stable, man. The men of the Lord are going to be stable, man. That's why the men of the Lord are going to be high value men in that time, as well as being rare, because the men of the Lord are not, many. The scriptures mention the laborers are few, and also the men of the Lord are the only ones that are going to have, protection from the Almighty Yahweh Shai. So as you can see, these foolish, people, venting on TikTok, on Twitter, about what the things they're gonna do, if they don't get their benefits, their SNAP benefits or their EBTs and all that, they're just, playing into the hand of the devil. They're just gonna do what's predicted of them, and ultimately Esau is gonna be justified coming with that sword. He's gonna justify himself coming with a sword on the people. And then if you're looking at the bigger picture, that's really Yahweh Shai, putting belt to ass on the 2/3, because the vast majority of our people have heard this truth and have, scoffed, mocked, and have been living a wicked lifestyle. It's time for them to pay. Don't feel sorry for them, man. That's why we only pray for the sincere and hopeful elect, man. Not these riffraff ninjas, and end ups. We don't pray for them, man. We pray for the sincere brothers and sisters of the hopeful elect, man. Striving for righteousness, man. Okay, the rest of our people, man, they're just a stain on our nation, and they're gonna be put down. The Lord's gonna have mercy on the remnant, because the remnant is really the Israel of the Most High. The rest of our people are likened unto heathens right now, and they're gonna get dealt with horribly, man. Okay, so people are gonna be fighting each other for goods, and it's gonna be a great humbling for these women as well, because desperate time calls for desperate measures, and these men are gonna turn into monsters, man. And you women are gonna be, you know, you're gonna be because you're the weaker vessel, you know, as well as children. Children are also weaker vessels, but the women are ultimately, the scripture talks about the weaker vessel being the woman. So you women, man, that be living in ease, like it says in Isaiah 32, man, rise up, you women that have been in ease, you know, you careless daughters, man, you know, you're about to suffer, man. You know, these men are going to be into monsters, man. When desperate times calls for desperate measures, man, it's going to be free for all out here. You know, that's why, you know, being, you know, with a man of the Lord is going to be a vital benefit, you know. But guess what? In that time, the men of the Lord are going to be, you know, highly sought after. And also, a lot of women are going to get rejected, you know. So for you women, man, you know, it's really going to be bleak out here for you, you know, as well as the men too, because the men are going to be crying as women, you know, they're going to be lamenting like women, you know, that's how bad it's going to be. How much more for you actual women, you know. The Lord is about to bring order back on the earth, man, in a terrible fashion. You know, if you don't repent as an Israelite and seek Yahweh Shai, you know, and be rooted in Yahweh Shai, you know, and hope in His mercy, you know, you're gonna get caught up in these wild things that are coming in these ugly times that we're in, these spooky and ugly times that we're in, you know, which we need to go through this in order to go into the kingdom, Lord willing, that we enjoy, you know, because through much tribulation shall we enter into the kingdom of heaven. You know, when we left Egypt, you know, ancient Egypt, you know, we didn't leave ancient Egypt just like that, man. We, you know, Pharaoh was coming after us, man. You know, Pharaoh, you know, he was putting up a fight. How much more Esau? You know, Esau is not going to just let Jake go like that. You know, Esau's going to come, you know, with a fight, but he's going to get smashed up by Yahweh Shai. But, you know, Esau's going to come after us, man. We're going to be in the midst of all of this, you know. That's why it's important to be rooted in the Lord, because the Lord is going to come through like He always does, you know. Just know that, you know, the hell with this devil, man. You know, seek Yahweh Shai. The rest of our people are going to go down to Egypt for help and are going to lose, while the elect, who are going to look upon Yahweh Shai, are going to really win in Yahweh Shai, because the victory is in Yahweh Shai, and they're going to overcome by the blood of Yahweh Shai. This is Ecclesiastes 12 verse 4. And the door shall be shut in the streets when the sounding of the grinding is low, and he shall rise up the voice of the bird, and the daughters of music shall be brought low. And now let me read it, verse 3. It's like here. In the days when the keepers of the house shall tremble, you know, these are the economists, you know, the people that, you know, check out for the economy of the society, you know, just under the nobles, you know. Okay, they're gonna tremble, man. You know, these people like the Wall Street and all that, they're gonna be trembling, you know. And the strong men shall bow themselves, the military, you know, all these strong ass men, you know, they're gonna bow themselves, you know. And the grinding cease, because they're few, you know, they ain't gonna be no more working, you know. And those that look out the windows shall be darkened, and their doors shall be shut in the streets when the sounding of the grinding is low, and shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and the daughters of music shall be brought low, and the entertainment is going to be brought low. You know, throughout the years, you know, everything, man, entertainment has been, you know, it's been piss poor. You know, music has been horrible, sports has been horrible, you know, the quality of life, you know, and even entertainment is horrible, man. You know, why? Because we're in the end of this kingdom, you know, and the grinding is ceased going into the jobs, man. There ain't gonna be no more jobs, man. And just today, you know, I saw an article, you know, about Amazon, you know, laying off, I think, 30,000 people, you know. So there's gonna be more people out of a job, and more people are gonna be resorting to crime. You know, it's gonna be horrible out here, you know, and that's gonna just justify Esau coming down with a sword, you know. And ultimately, they want to put everyone in that UBI, universal basic income, and you have a chip inside you, you know, which is the mark of the beast. The microchip is the mark of the beast. And if you can't see that now, you know, ultimately the Lord doesn't want you to see it. You know, just pray on it, man. You know, if you can't see it, if you're watching these videos, you know, and you're doubting that the MOTB is the chip, you know, you better pray to the Lord, man, that the Lord open your mind, you know, because it is the chip, and there's no time for doubting, man, because this chip is on the way, you know. The digital IDs, you know, the talk of it being mandatory is here. How much more when the chip, you know, because the chip is just around the corner, man. It could happen. Literally, 2026 could be 2026 could be the year when Yahweh Shemashah allows Esau Edom to bring that MOTB, man. You know, first voluntary, then ultimately mandatory. You know, and it's being voluntary in Sweden. You know, the chip is, you know, it's being, you know, tested in these countries, these weird ass countries. Where just people just take the chip like it's nothing. You know, but how much more when they bring it to, you know, America and the UK and throughout the first world countries and throughout the whole world at the end of the day. You know, because the hour temptation is going to come upon the whole world. You know, MOTB is going to be global. You know, the microchip is going to be made mandatory, and most people are going to take it. Even people that know that they're Israelites are going to take it. That's why we hope the Lord keep us in the hour of temptation, because the only ones that are going to really be down for the Lord, you know, is really the elect. You know, and that's a few Israelites, a very few Israelites. You know, this ain't no joke, man. Okay, that's why, you know, seek the Lord while He may be found, man. You know, because that chip is so close, and we're about to be tested than we ever been tested, man. And all the time that we've been in this truth, you know, especially our apostles, man, who've been in this truth for decades. You know, Lord willing, they endure and get delivered, as well as the rest of the hopefully elect family. You know, the MOTB is going to be the ultimate test. There's a reason why we had this grace period, to build us up for that time, man, so that we don't buckle up under pressure on that time, because it's going to be very tempting to take the MOTB, because this man's going to come with lying wonders and miracles, man. You know, Elder Ashwama did a beautiful lesson on, about the MOTB and you know, how Esau's going to use it to, you know, basically make the people, you know, take it, you know, through miracles, like, you know, the cancer, not cancer, so like the, you know, making the blind people see. You know, I think that just broke out this week, that news about that, and Elder Brother did a lesson on that, and I advise you to check and watch Elder Brother's, the news of prophecy, man, because they're very edifying. You know, on Elder Brother's pages, Remnant saved 144,000. You know, you should subscribe, man. You know, because Yahweh Shemashai, you know, is dealing with the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. If you can receive it, you know, because not many people are going to receive this. Okay, so as apostle was going into, that, you know, Esau basically telling people that he can make you see, you know, these miracles, man, on the left hand side. You know, okay, but really, it's really a snare. It's really a trap. You know, because when Esau has that chip inside you, he got you. You know, you become a GMO in the sight of Yahweh Shemashai. You know, you're an abomination. So an abomination gets destroyed. So taking that chip is a one-way ticket to destruction, man. You know, you cooked if you take that chip. You know, you've been won, you know, by Yahweh Shemashai's men, and it's really coming from Yahweh Shemashai. Okay, so, and the government cuts, you know, no jobs, you know, and the doors of music, the entertainment, you know, and the no joy in the streets, you know, it's looking ugly now. How much more when Yahweh Shemashai has it play out in the coming months, man? You know, especially when you know, people ain't gonna be able to buy food, man. You know, no benefits. You know, the government shutdown keeps continuing. You know, it's gonna get itty and gritty. It's gonna get nasty out there. You know, Lord willing, you know, brothers and apostles and elders and brothers, and also brothers and sisters that believe in, you know, may Yahweh Shemashai have mercy on you, man, as well as ourselves, you know, throughout the whole earth, because we're headed into these ugly times, you know. But if you're looking at America right now, it's getting serious over there, you know. Okay, Nero's in office, man, you know. So yeah, man, you know, it's getting ugly, man. You know, Slakia. Yeah, Slakia about that. Yeah, it's getting ugly, man. You know, who knows what's coming down? We know what's coming down the pipeline, because we got the, you know, the how Shemashai revealed his secrets unto his servants, the prophets. You know what? We know what's coming, but you know, we know in part, we prophesy in part. We don't know how the Lord's gonna have it play out. You know, but Lord willing, man, this, you know, November, you know, the cut, you know, the cuts to the benefits, and normally this, you know, government shutdown, Lord willing, it, you know, it keeps on going, you know, because we want this crisis, man. You know, we want this devil to fully come down with great wrath, man, and implement that chip, you know, so we can get up out of here, Lord willing, we're part of the Lord's elect, so that Yahweh Shai can return, you know, because the Lord ain't gonna return before, you know, the Most High's, you know, before the chip happens, you know, that the Most High's prophecies happen in order. Yahweh Shai is going to come after the chip, you know. So we got, you know, wait patiently, and may the Lord have mercy on us, man. You know, because it's going to be ugly, man. You know, famine and cannibalism is coming back, you know. You know, man, it's going to be very ugly out here, man. You know, that's why, man, it's best, you know, continue praying and be rooted in Yahweh Shai, man. You know, and I say that for myself, man. You know, we're going to be put to the test, man. We're going to lose comforts too, man. You know, you got brothers and sisters that do, you know, have, you know, that do, you know, rely on, you know, government aid. But at the end of the day, you know, we ultimately rely on Yahweh Shai. You know, remember that, man. You know, but the Lord is going to come through like he always does, man. We just got to do and be faithful and strive for righteousness, man. And do what was commanded of us by Yahweh Shai, by his son Yahweh Shai, man. You know, because when all this happens, man, you know, the Lord is going to protect his elect. He's not going to leave his elect hanging in this worst time period ever, man. The elect are going to be eaten, man. You know, while the rest of our people and the vast majority of the world are going to be suffering, you know. So yeah, man, you know, things are looking bleak, and Tawadi Yahweh Shai, you know, Lord willing, it continues, man, and shit's going to get crazy very soon, man. You know, it's going to get very ugly very soon, man. You know, this devil's about to come down with that sword, man. You know, he's about to, you know, showcase those horns, man. You know, and we're very close, man. We're very close to that persecution, the ugliest time period ever, which is the time of Jacob's trouble, the worst time known to man. You know, a time like there's never been. That's what's coming, man. Fear Yahweh Shai, seek the Lord while he may be found. You know, grace period is almost over, man. You know, I want to give all praises to Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai, Bashem, Rakakodash, double honors to my apostles, elders, great millstone. Shalom to my beloved brothers that are doing the work, preaching this word, as well as my brothers and few sisters that are listening and learning, that are striving for righteousness too. Shalom.